Tonight, Senate Democrats are calling for the Pentagon to launch an independent inspector general's investigation into the Navy's decision to relieve the captain of the USS Theodore Roosevelt from his post. Captain Brett Crozier, who you see here, sounded the alarm over the COVID-19 outbreak that was on board his aircraft carrier. He wrote a letter to Navy officials on Sunday calling for the ship's immediate evacuation after more than 100 sailors tested positive on board. Now, the acting Secretary of the Navy says that the captain acted without discussing the letter with his immediate commander and sent the letter over an unsecure, unclassified email system.
But it was copied to 20 or 30 other people. Okay, that's just not acceptable. He did not take care, and what that did is it created a panic on a little bit of a panic on the ship. That demonstrated extremely poor judgment in the middle of a crisis, because what it's done, it's created a firestorm. It's created doubts about the ship's ability to go to sea if it needs to. It's created doubt among the families about the health of their sailors, and that was a completely unnecessary thing to do in the midst of a crisis.
Joining me now, General Jack Keane, retired four-star general and Fox News senior strategic analyst. General Keane, always good to see you. What's your take on this story?
Yeah, I think it's pretty unfortunate circumstances taking place here, because everybody involved here is well-intentioned. And, you know, my first issue with it is the Secretary of the Navy. Listen, he's completely justified in taking the actions for the reasons he stated. But why is he doing that is the question I'm asking. He's got at least 4 admirals between him and his captain. That's over 100 years of experience that are involved in Navy operations. If you got a concern about somebody who's running the most powerful symbol of American power in this country, which is an aircraft carrier, let those admirals make that assessment and make the judgment about that. But the Navy Secretary got himself personally invested in this. I understand he may have had a conversation with the captain last week. So that's issue one for me. And if you're doing that, if you're making those decisions and not letting the admiral make those decisions at lower levels, aren't you going around the chain of command and weakening that chain of command and doing something like that? In my judgment, that's true. But I'll go back to it. He has the authority to do it. Secondly, is why do it now? The Roosevelt is not operationally deployed. There is a strike command group that's on that ship that's still functioning, and they have control of the other ships. But the ship's company, by and large, are all focused on what? On sheltering, on isolation, and testing the crew, and getting the now 140 who are ill taken care of. 90-something of those are symptomatic. We all know that a Navy captain is a larger-than-life figure on a ship. Everybody has an opinion about that captain who serves on that ship. Most of them are very favorable because we got great people out there serving. And to remove that person in the middle of the crisis that's threatening the lives of the people on that ship seems to me the timing is off. Let's make a judgment about the mistake he may have made, but let him continue there until the full assessment is completed, and let's get some emotional separation from this. The third thing is the captain himself. I mean, why would he write a letter after he's had plenty of dialogue with his chain of command on a non-secure net and then copy people on that letter who are not in his chain of command? Some of them are subordinate to him. That is absolutely a boneheaded mistake in my view, despite the fact it's well-intentioned. Obviously, he was talking to his chain of command before they got to Guam, very high in the chain of command, and they knew he had a lot of concern. They were working on trying to get him the needs, and at some point over the weekend, I'm convinced he must have come to the conclusion, hey, listen, they're not moving fast enough. I've got to do something about this. Right. And that sparked the letter. But there are other ways to handle that. That whole chain of command, if he wanted them on a VTC to talk to them about the problem he's got, to include the Chief of Naval Operations and go all the way to the top with everybody else on that VTC, he would have got that VTC without any problem whatsoever. Why do that? And that judgment call is what at issue here.
Well, and it may be one that he regrets. I have no idea. But as you say, he clearly got to the point, or I would assume just from this sequence of events that he got to the point where he felt like nobody was listening to him and that his people were in a bad situation that he wanted to help them out of. Listen to this video. This is them cheering him on as he was leaving the ship. They're chanting, "Captain Crozier, Captain Crozier." I mean, that's a lot of folks, General Keane, who seem to feel like he had their back.
Well, to my point, I mean, he's a larger-than-life figure on that ship. Everybody knows who he is, and you can see the send-off that he's getting from many of the crew members. Obviously don't agree with that decision. They're emotionally invested in this themselves. I go back to my original point. I mean, it's an unfortunate situation. I think it could have been better handled. I believe when you're dealing with issues that take place in the chain of command, those who are closest to that chain of command, they know the facts, they know the people involved, let them make the decisions and the assessment about that. People in the Pentagon making decisions about a guy who's running a ship out in the Pacific, I think I think that's well-intentioned. You have the authority to do it, but I think we're better served that we leave it to people much closer to the problem.
General Keane, always good to get your thoughts. Thank you, sir. Good to see you tonight.
Yeah.
Stay well.
Yeah, good talking to you, Martha.